We've returned for this week's edition of the Legislative Update, and we bring in Mark Messmer, who's actually had a very long week, and as many of you are well aware about RFRA, so we're just going to go ahead and get it out of the way.
We'll dive into that one first. It's been an interesting week. Last week, the bill had passed and been signed, and there was some rumbling, out in the LGBT community about, hey, this could possibly be used to support discrimination. Well, that's not what the bill did. I think we discussed kind of the details of it. But they were getting a little traction on that story. Sunday, the governor went and spoke on national TV and really didn't understand the bill himself and made a touchy situation kind of a five-alarm fire situation. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, House and Senate leadership spent a lot of time with folks from the NCAA, folks from the Eli Lilly, corporate community, Cummins, the tourism industry, people from the tech companies in California. I mean, all the people who had kind of brought some what was concerns to, after some of the governor's statements on Sunday, some panic almost. And so on Thursday, we finally, after a lot of time, a lot of discussion, a lot of work, with former Mayor Bart Peterson, everybody pulled together and really put out a clarifying bill, a law that clarified what courts have already ruled. I mean, this freedom of religion statute doesn't give you any new constitutional protection. It gives courts direction on how to, if there's a time when the government feels the need to infringe on your religious liberty is necessary, for some legitimate reason, it needs to be done in the least restrictive means possible. But I will read what our constitutional protection is on religious freedom, and that really, if you have a one-on-one dispute with somebody on a religious freedom issue, this bill doesn't help. I mean, that's not what it's for.
Breaking out the phone for this one.
That's right. I had to actually look it up, make sure I get it worded right. What our constitutional protection says: no law in any case whatever shall be passed to control the free exercise and enjoyment of religious opinions or interfere with the rights of conscience. That's even, and there's other statements of that as well. But our state level freedom of religion constitutional protections are very detailed and very specific and give us a high degree of protection. This law doesn't give you the religious freedom protection the Constitution does. This law just, all it ever did was gave basically the Supreme Court, guidance on how to determine cases where, if society feels there's a need of safety of public interest that supersedes, maybe, and slightly does, interfere with your religious rights, it needs to be done in the least restrictive means possible. So we got that done on Thursday. All of the folks that had raised concerns were very happy with that clarifying law that we passed. The governor signed it, I think, about 6 o'clock on Thursday evening, and the issue seems to be resolved, that there is no way you can discriminate from freedom of religion, the RFRA bill that we passed the week before. We knew it, court history proved it, so now that's been resolved.
And then, of course, tonight is the beginning of festivities downtown Indianapolis for the Final Four.
You bet.
So
people were coming. Yeah, it was really kind of important to get this done and take it off the radar. I mean, there was potentially billions of dollars of business with folks in our community, people in the tourism business, the convention business. The impact could have been severe, and now they'll I'm sure the convention bureaus, the folks I mean, they'll have to spend a little time and effort to make sure people are aware that we have no intention to discriminate, and this law didn't do it, and now we'll move forward and just focus on what's important. Having a good turnout, a good experience for the folks coming into town, for the NCAA tournament. It's a high-profile event for our city and our state.
And then the last thing on this subject before we move on to other things, looking kind of in retrospect, is there anything that you guys, looking back, might have done differently to avoid all this?
Well, I mean, in reality, I don't know that we could have anticipated the discrimination charge ahead of time. Probably should have anticipated it and should have got out in front of the issue messaging it. This was all about lack of messaging prior to it passing. They should have been out in front of this thing a month ago, 2 weeks ago, and clarified all these things in advance. And if need be, the clarifying bill that we passed on Thursday probably should have been included in the original bill. But I don't know that the severity of the reaction was anticipated, and probably wouldn't have been as severe had our governor not done such a bad job trying to explain the bill on Sunday. So seems to be in good shape now, but a lesson learned that on issues of social social concern, you need to get out front and message it a whole lot better than we did on this one.
So now, contrary to popular belief, there were other things happening
Believe
at the
it or
State
not,
House this week.
we did get some work done. We didn't get as much done as we'd have liked to, but we did have committees that met and bills that got passed, and did have some progress. And one of my bills that I authored got final passage in the House this week, the Senate Bill 361, that gives propane companies the ability to have some liability protection. That passed unanimously in the House, so very, very pleased with that. They did, when I filed the bill, one of the attorneys in the Civil Law Committee enhanced it a little bit, more than we were expecting, but we're happy if it would have passed that way. The House took it back down to the original version, so I'll take it in for concurrence vote on Tuesday, and hopefully, have that concurrence pass. The original bill passed. I think it was unanimous in the House, so should be able to, or Senate should be able to get a final passage on that this week and send it to the governor. Then Senate Bill 309, which was an issue that had a lot of interest, that deals with the REC territories, got final passage in the House this week. I've got my hearing finally. It was supposed to be this week, but due to scheduling conflicts, we're going to hear the Senate bill on the farm winery, direct ship to consumers Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. So very happy to get that one moved on down the line, and the chairman in the House seems very comfortable with where we're at on that bill. We'll do a bit of amending that from when the bill left the Senate. We knew there were some slight tweaks we wanted to do to that. Instead of having, we were going to have a fee change, and we're going to have a fee change that'll, if you're a low volume winery, your registration fee will be $100 a year, and every 1,000 cases you ship, it'll go up another $100 a year. That made the small producers and the big producers all kind of comfortable with that. Some other minor technical changes: when you don't have to have a face-to-face contact first, then there was some affidavit and verification of seeing the license and other things that were in code that we need to, if we're going to take away all of it, part of it we need to take away all of the connected pieces. So there'll be some minor cleanup, but feel pretty good about that one. Hopefully get that one out of committee Tuesday and onto the floor the following day or two in the House, and get final passage on it. So pretty exciting.
If I might, real quick, backtracking just a little bit to Senate Bill 309. I assume, obviously, we had several local officials who testified on that bill. How much testimony in all was heard, if there was a rough idea?
Well, I didn't go to any of the committee hearings on that. There were some, mayors who did testify, against any change. But all that bill did, it doesn't eliminate the possibility for cities to take areas, over that, when they annex. But when you're taking over territory from one utility to the other, it needs to be done on equal footing. And I mean, if I had a contract that allowed me to set all the rules and do it on my terms totally, I probably wouldn't want to give that up either. But so I mean, there was some timing of when that happens that got adjusted. I think amended in the House, to adjust by a few weeks, I think, on when it's going to take effect. But very, very minor changes.
The Senate testimony was probably fairly similar to
House and Senate testimony. The same people came to testify in support and against in the House and the Senate, and I think it passed by pretty equal margins percentage-wise in the House that it did in the Senate. So.
All right. So now continuing on down, you still have several more things to go over.
We did have some bills that we heard in my committees that received final passage this week that some of them I thought were kind of interesting. One was a bill, and there's federal legislation that allows, if you have university or school or institutions that have a lot of food waste. Federally, you're allowed to take that food waste and recycle it into food pellets, basically, for swine feed. But our state law did not allow recycled food to be used, in animal feed industry. So we basically match the state laws up with the federal laws. They'll take food from, restaurants, schools, universities, places like that, pelletize it, sanitize it, and then heat it up to a temperature that kills any bacteria in it, and then allow that to be integrated into swine feed. Why throw it in our landfills or in our sewage systems? If it can be put back into the food network, that's a good thing.
I presume the farmers were probably fairly happy when they heard about that.
And
one.
Actually, there's a group in Westgate that wants to open up a business to do that.
Really?
The Crane Tech Park. They wanted to do it. They started looking into that about 2 years ago when I was covering that area in my House district. And we started moving the issue forward. We found out that the state laws needed to change. I think it was maybe into session last year or so. Representative Ubelor, who covers part of that territory as well, went ahead and carried the issue this year, and then moved it on through. So that was an interesting bill that will have some pretty immediate impact on being able to implement that and get the technology and folks in place that want to move ahead with that.
Of course, now another interesting bill, we discussed this before, it involves fire departments and getting kids out of wrecked cars.
Yep, that was a bill that, and I had some local fire departments that asked about that last year as well. If you have a child trapped in the car's locked, windows are up, there was no clarity that if you broke the window out to get the kid out that you wouldn't be sued by the car owner. You would think that would be crazy, but crazy things happen, and that's why a lot of the things we do that address existing statutes that are unclear. So it gives somebody in that scenario, the ability to have civil immunity if you've got a kid that's screaming, it's hot outside, and there's imminent danger to that kid, that you can break the window and get the kid out without being sued. So, interesting topic, kind of started locally, and good to see that one through and final vote on the floor this week in the Senate.
So what else did you have that was interesting this week?
Well, we did have a fun event on Tuesday. There was a World War II veteran from Ferdinand, my uncle Bernie Helming, who has several of my cousins still live in the area. He was in a unit called the Devil's Brigade in World War II, and they had a 99-day stretch of continuous battle. That's where their first special unit forces, that unit got tagged the Devil's Brigade. There was about 1,800 men in the unit. They came up through Italy, conquered several places, in Rome and up through into France. And there was a story in the Herald that I shared with the folks on the Senate floor that Bernie could speak, pretty fluent German, and there was a German unit in battle that they had come upon, and they intercepted. He climbed up the telephone lines. They intercepted the phone cables, and got in contact with the German unit, and got them to believe that it was orders from higher command that they were outnumbered and they should just surrender, and they did. And so that was one of the neat stories from that his family shared with me. And they were highly decorated. They got the Congressional Gold Medal as a unit back in February. Survivors were invited, but folks who had deceased members of that unit were not invited. I think one of my cousins was able to get a ticket to attend through Mitch McConnell's office in Kentucky. They found one, but the rest of the family wasn't able to attend. And we did have one of the survivors from Lebanon, Indiana, that came to the ceremony on Tuesday. A couple of the spouses of survivors, the survivors were not in good enough physical health to get there, and about 20 family members from some of the deceased members of that unit that came. We had a ceremony in the House, a ceremony in the Senate, and just a good celebration of honoring our World War II vets. That was, since they couldn't, most of them had no chance to get to Washington when they had their Congressional Gold Medal presentation. It was nice to be able to honor them back at home. One of the daughters of one of the survivors that was there brought a replica. She didn't want to bring the real thing because the real gold medal, it was about a 3-inch round solid gold medal, worth about $30,000, and so she brought the bronze replica that showed us and shared it with the folks in the General Assembly. And it was just a good, uplifting day.
I'm sure many of the other members of the Assembly enjoyed that as well.
Oh, absolutely. We had, usually when we have a nice resolution like that, we have a motion to let all Senate members, be joint authors of that resolution. So they all asked to be put on it as a group of 50, and we're happy to do that. So that was a fun highlight of the week.
Absolutely. That's a great way to wrap up our segment. So, Mark, we appreciate you joining us.
Okay, look forward to it next week. And everybody at home, have a great Easter weekend. Take time to slow down, be with your families, and remember, what Easter weekend and Easter season is all about.
Absolutely. Happy Easter to you as well.
Thank you.
That's been this week's legislative update. Thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We are local people watching local people.